Hello and welcome to our show. I'm Jamie West. Today we're going to be talking about Infinite Artistry of Creation. Every day my husband and I get up very early in the morning because of our animals and we take a walk. As you can see, we live in the woods. You can see the woods behind us. I live in a little house in the woods in Midwest America, and it's very rural. We're about 30 miles from the nearest small town. So we get to see a lot of nature. When we take our morning walks with the dogs, we head down to the road. We live on a dirt road. We head down the road, and we usually go very early in the morning. But on the morning walks, when we go down the road, we're walking straight east. So on many occasions, my husband and I get to see the sunrise. I always have a camera in my pocket, and I try to get good pictures of the sun as it rises up, because it's just so beautiful. We have the green rolling hills and our little dirt road going off into infinity. And we have, sometimes there's clouds rolling in and they're rimmed with the gold from the sun. And it's just almost every morning there's some type of beautiful sunset. Sometimes the sun rises through the trees and you can see, it looks like the forest is on fire because the sun is coming up, and it's red and orange and pink and just beautiful. And then other times there'll be, in the wintertime, it's really pretty because there'll be, the trees are very stark, you know, they have no leaves on them, and they're just reaching up to the sky and the sun rises behind them, and it just looks very, spooky almost sometimes. And then the sun comes completely up. And we live where there's very little light pollution. So we also can go out at night and just watch the stars, and we actually use a monocular and binoculars both. We also have a telescope, which we haven't set up for a while, but even using the monocular or the binoculars, you can see quite a bit of the heavens. When we set up the telescope, we have a very large telescope. When we do set it up out in the yard, we try to do it for a special sky event where we can see, one time we set it up because the most moons of Jupiter were going to be visible from Earth, and another time we set it up because Saturn was moving close and we would be able to see the rings of Saturn. And we've also gone out and taken photographs in the middle of the night of the different moons, the blood moon and a couple of other lunar events that we wanted to see. The pictures didn't turn out that great because we're not that great of photographers, but it was fun to do. So all of this nature surrounding us and us being able to walk every day. When we walk with our dogs, that's my thinking time. My husband usually gets ahead of me because that dog is younger and likes to go explore and everything. And I just casually walk with the older dog, and it's my time when I speak with God. And I look out there in nature, see the sunrise, see the cloud formations, see the trees greening up in the spring and losing their leaves in the fall. And it just brings you closer to God. Being out in nature where you are looking at God's artistry just brings you closer to God. And so I know a lot of people don't have the advantage of living out in the woods or being able to get out in nature a lot, but there are ways that you can do different things to help bring you closer to God. One of them is praying, and another is creating. We're going to discuss creation right now. So I'm going to be reading from the Bible, some of the verses about creation, and we're going to go through it and talk about what's going on and what I plan to show you. Today, I'm going to be creating part of a quilt. I did part of it in anticipation of this show so that we could put it together and you could see it kind of flow from my fingers as I worked it. I used a pattern from a company called Northern Hearth, and it was a row quilt that they put out in 2015. But I added to it because I felt like I wanted to show you the evolution of creation as God did it in the Bible. So with that note, I'm going to read some of the biblical verses, and then you're going to see me how I created a quilt and the pieces that I put together. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering above the waters. So we're going to start with the water. I put these pieces together to signify water, and as you can see, some of them actually do look like water, some of them are swirls looking like waves, and there's even a little bit of sparkle in there. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was an evening, and there was morning, which was the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky. And there was evening and there was morning of the second day. So let's put the sky up there now. I'm going to put it a little high. And we'll move things if we need to. So now we've put the sky up. And as you can see, the sky is separated from the water, just as God said in creation. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered in one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. So let's put a little bit of land in there. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the third day. As you can see, I made some of these look like green and brown of the woods around me. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars and set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate lights from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So, let's put the sunrise right up here. And we're going to move this down just a little. And so you put the sun for the day. And he put the moon for the night, sun and the moon. And I put a piece of fabric there that had stars on it. So now, in a little quilty pictorial, you've seen how God created the earth. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems, and that moves about in it according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. God created mankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Did you know that the On Purpose team prays daily for your needs? We do. Jesus is the great physician who can heal any ailment, spiritual or physical. He can provide for any need. If you need prayer, let us know about it. It is our privilege and pleasure to hold you up to the Most High God. There is nothing too big or too small for God. Visit www.pelicast.net day or night and click the Request Prayer link at the bottom of the page. Our prayer team will pray for your needs.
And we all know what happened on the seventh day. God rested. So let's go back into the order of things. When I was creating this quilt, I was using a technique that I have never used before. It was extremely frustrating because even though I've made hundreds of quilts, and I really have, I've made hundreds of quilts, I had never used this technique. So I had to step outside my comfort zone to begin creating. And this is what this show is about. God made creation so important that he put it at the very front of the Bible. He wanted it to be the first part of the story, in the beginning, which is where most stories start, right? And so he showed us a very structured way of how he created. And each day he created something different and put it together and then put it all with what he had created before. And so on the sixth day when he created us, he said that he made us in his image. We are made to create, just like God created the earth. We are made to have some type of hidden talent or hidden hobby. We are made to use the artistry around us that God has given us to do things. And my particular passion right now is quilting. And so I went out and I bought this pattern. I looked high and low for a pattern that I thought would convey this sense of creation and present it to you. And so I finally found this pattern, and of course it was beautiful, but it had a technique that I'd never seen before or had never used. And so as I was doing the creation, I knew that I was going to present it as a show. So I knew I had to work through it. And so I had to read the directions very carefully. I had to do everything. Initially, when I first started doing it, I cut the pieces in what I thought they were supposed to look like, and I made several mistakes. And I had to stop, and I had to go back, and I had to read the instructions and cut the pieces exactly as the author intended. And so following directions was something that I do normally do that. I normally do follow directions, but for some reason I thought I understood what she was trying to say, and I tried to leap ahead and save myself some time. And when I did that, I made massive mistakes. So I had to go back and really read the directions and do it her way, the author of the pattern. So I start doing it her way, and things start coming together. And then she also had a sort of unique way to sew it together, where she did certain things as she went along instead of waiting until the quilt was completely done. Well, I had never done that either. And so I went and I tried to sidestep that. I thought, well, I'll just put it together my way and I know it'll come out right. It did not. And so once again, I had to go back to the instructions. And each thing that was done in the quilted part, in the sewing together part, was done in a step-by-step fashion wherein each piece built on the next one. And I was not expecting that. I don't know why, but each piece had to be sewn in a certain order so that it would correspond with the next one. And so finally, when I got it in my head that I had to do it her way, everything started coming together. It came together beautifully. As you can see, it's very well pieced. The reason that you see little gaps here and there, though, is because this has not been sewn together. Once it's sewn together, those gaps will disappear, and there will probably be a little bit of trimming done to make it all match. But the point I want to get across in this is that with all of my experiences of walking the dogs in the morning and going out and spending time with God, because I do, I spend a lot of that time on that walk in prayer, talking to God while I'm noticing all the beautiful things that He has laid out before us. He put everything together in a certain order so that everything would fit exactly as it should when everything was done. And when I started following the directions, instead of trying to go my own way, I started putting things together the way that they should in a certain order so that we could see step-by-step progression of how they built on each other. You have to wonder sometimes, God could have created the earth in the blink of an eye. He could have just blinked His eyes and done everything all at once. And yet He showed us this step-by-step progression. He showed us that we need to do things in a certain order, that when we start to create, there is order out of the chaos, that we can create beautiful things too. And it was an important lesson to me because I never thought of creation that way. I never thought of creation as just infinite artistry. I never thought of God as, I've heard the story of creation since I was a child, but I never thought of God as creating something like we create a quilt or we write a story or we knit or crochet something that we created just because it was beautiful and just because we enjoyed doing it. God enjoyed creation, and He wanted us to see how He created so that we could do the same sort of thing. Of course, we can't create a world, but we can create other things. And He was showing us that rather than doing everything all at once, that there is a certain satisfaction in doing a little at a time so that each step builds on the next. When we start to learn something new, when we find a passion or a hobby that we're interested in, we have to go through a practicing period where we don't do anything well. And when I first started sewing, because I didn't start quilting right away, I started sewing first. When I first started sewing, my seams were crooked, things didn't match up, I sewed things together backwards or wrong side out, and I would have to take all those stitches out, and it was very annoying. And as I got better, I did those things less and less. At the same time, sometimes I still did them. And even while I was putting this quilt together, I put things together wrong. And I did things wrong because I thought I knew better than the author. And when we think about the things that God asks us to do, when we think about some of the rules, the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule and all of that, we constantly think about the things that we have to do. Know that you will make mistakes. Know that you will have times where you will be so frustrated you'll want to throw everything in the trash. But also know that as you progress and do it in a step-by-step order and master a certain part of the skill, you will slowly begin to progressively build onto the skills that you already have. And that is an amazing thing. As I was putting the quilt together, I had a great deal of difficulty, which I had mentioned before. One of the things I had difficulty with is that there are 22 colors in this quilt. And I thought that because the colors were so different that it would be easy to just cut them and set them aside, cut them and set them aside. And in my own way, as I cut them and set them aside, cut the strips and set them aside, I made my work area empty of order. It was chaos. So when I think about God and where he said the earth was out without form and void, I kind of thought of myself when I put them all aside and set them in this big pile of all these different colors. And I thought when I went to put it together, I would just snatch out the color and go sew it and iron it down and put it down and get the next color and all of that. Except that's not what happened. What happened is I had this great big ball of nothing. And all these different colors were all mixed up, and I didn't realize that there are actually, if you look, there are 6 colors of the various blues, and they had to be put together in a certain order so that it would look like the ocean and the water. So what I did to fix that, first of all, I was upset and it was evening and I went to bed angry. I went to bed angry at myself because I had made this big mess and I wasn't sure if I could clean it all up. When I got up the next day, I had a solution. So I believe God was working with me overnight and telling me this is what you're going to do. I went and got some Post-it notes and I went through the book again and I matched up the fabric that I had cut with the measurements in each color. The book had all the colors listed and the measurements of each thing that I cut. And I marked the fabrics A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on to the 22nd letter of the alphabet. And so once I had it all straight, it was so much easier to keep track because suddenly the instructions made sense. The instructions said, I'm going to make it up because I can't remember exactly how it was, but sew fabric A to fabric B and press it and then measure and make sure it's the right size and then sew fabric B to fabric C. And that's how it went. It went in this beautiful progressive order and it was amazing. Everything came together as it should. And if I had done that in the first place, again, followed the directions, again, put things in order, it would have made putting together the quilt so much easier. And that goes back to God not doing things in the blink of an eye, but instead showing us a progression. So once it was all together, I actually made two. I did one for the layout purposes as we went through the creation story, and I made a second one side by side with it so that y'all could see the finished product. This is the finished wall hanging or table runner, whatever I decide to turn it into. As you can see, most of the pieces match very well. And I have to admit too, I added the sky and the moon. Those were not in the original pattern, but I wanted to have the sun, the moon, and the stars in this little table runner wall hanging of creation. I hope you enjoyed following me on this journey as we work through the creation story and as we work through knowing that we have the ability to create because we were created in God's image. When you go out, find your hobby, find your passion, find a way to glorify God in the beauty of the world around you. Find a way to find your infinite artistry in creation.
On Purpose is funded through sponsor support. We thank you for your generosity. To donate or to learn more about sponsorships and the On Purpose mission, visit www.pelicast.net. If you have questions or comments about this program, email us at suggestionbox@pelicast.net.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Join us next week as we tackle yet another tough issue from a Christian perspective.
Mac McCann has the perfect life, loving wife, adorable son, until tragedy strikes. Unable to cope with the loss of their son, Mac escapes to Afghanistan, taking a job training police officers. Friendships with the soldiers on base begin to grow, and a bond of fatherhood forms between Mac, a local barber, and the man's son. Healing begins. But when the hour of attack arrives, Mac must decide what's worth living for. Flowers from Afghanistan by Susie Parrish.
You're on the go, rushing to meet deadlines, surrounded by chaos, just getting it done. Take time out for you. Read a paperback or ebook. Escape the grind. Commune with God with uplifting Christian romance, action adventure, mystery, sci-fi. Your choice, your time, anytime. Illuminating fiction. Pelican Book Group.